So, since March of 2020, I have been so careful, been taking all the COVID precautions. I wore a mask regularly. I didn't eat at restaurants for the longest time, and I think that's probably one of the biggest sacrifices that I had to make. I really enjoy cooking. I really enjoy finding a new restaurant and trying something new. I did the curbside thing. We supported some of our local restaurants here in the valley as well as when we were in San Antonio, and it was nice to support some of those restaurants in that way, but inevitably it just felt a little bit not quite as good. Like the bread might have been soggy or the temperature kind of cooled a little bit by the time you got it home to eat it. I'm not great when it comes to takeout like that. I did grocery pickups pre-COVID even, and my spouse called that bougie of me. But lo and behold, it became a thing, right? It became a thing that everybody was doing. And HEB here in Texas is continuing to keep the grocery pickups free, provided that you plan ahead. So, like, you can set a pickup for the morning, and then you can go in the afternoon and pick it up, and it's free. But I guess it was my turn to get COVID. I know I had a couple of times where I had to take the rapid test at home, and there were even a couple of times I had to go in and get a PCR test just to be sure. I was still working throughout the pandemic, so inevitably I was around people, and we were doing a job, and it seemed inevitable that I was going to be around somebody who might have been exposed to it or around someone else. But even with all the precautions I took, I guess I just got really lucky and hadn't gotten COVID until now. But, let me tell you, I am grateful that I got this strand. My worst symptom thus far has just been increasing and extreme fatigue, just feeling very lethargic. And that's the worst, and it could have been, and I know it was a lot worse for a lot of people. Relative to symptoms, I can only imagine that the symptoms that excuse me, I'm experiencing are probably on a much smaller scale than what others might have experienced earlier throughout the earlier stages of the pandemic. I have a fever. I have a sore I have a sore throat, and I'm fighting some coughing fits, and I can still breathe. So I recognize that some of my symptoms that get better with medication, legitimately get better with some medication, might be evident in the video too. If you take a break for a second, because I felt like I was going to have a coughing fit, take some medication, wait 20 minutes or so, 30 minutes or so, and then I could try to come back to filming. I recognize my symptoms probably are not nearly as bad as what some others experienced earlier throughout the course of the pandemic, but I do have a sore throat. I have a little bit of a fever that I'm fighting, and I just feel extremely lethargic. I don't even know how to say it other than just extreme fatigue. And I think that was that was one of the dead giveaways initially, right? That I was tired after some manual labor at the day job. That's normal, right? Like, you're supposed to be tired after lifting a few things around and doing some work and being outside for several hours throughout the course of the day. You're supposed to be tired, right? And I went to bed, and then I felt fine the next morning. But it was around lunchtime the following day that I realized I was starting to feel this sore throat coming on, and I didn't really realize, and then the more research I did on this particular strand of COVID, that more and more people were experiencing a sore throat. In addition to just extreme fatigue. So those are my main symptoms, and in terms of how I'm medicating and coping to try to manage some of those symptoms, I'm really grateful for the fact that as COVID was occurring, as COVID started, I was driving back from a family funeral in early March of 2020, and my spouse was doing grocery pickups and doing things to try to get us set for the start of something that we couldn't help but feel like was extremely big. It was impactful. And part of that preparation meant that we were stocking up on some things that might help us make us feel a little bit more human again. And I want to make sure that it's understood that we recognize that COVID, and even from the start, was more, than just, it was more than just the flu. We knew that. We know that. But we also thought that if we were experiencing flu-like symptoms, that if we purchased some of those types of medications, it might help us patch through, just a little bit easier. I'm really grateful that we had the forethought to do that. Things like Theraflu and some extra medication for a fever and things of that nature, to just even things like the extra hand sanitizer that we bought, like things that we're kind of just working through now, just in a normal day-to-day clip anymore. I'm really grateful that we had the wherewithal to kind of think about some of those things. They're coming in really handy at the moment. And there's just never a good time, I guess, to feel under the weather, particularly at the start of a new school year. And I am guilty of feeling extreme frustration in that I kind of even thought out loud, like, I could just not test and then I wouldn't know, but I would know. And that kind of stuff, it just eats at you, right? It eats at me, at least. So like, I needed to test. I needed to just be like, all right, here it is. I even took 2 tests to make sure I'm COVID positive. I need to do the right thing. I need to practice the CDC guidelines. I need to self-quarantine for a little while. And when I'm ready to go back to the office, meaning that my fever is gone and I can quote unquote function again in society, like my symptoms are gone enough to that point that I wear a mask and do so for the appropriate period of time, because I could still technically be contagious for up to 20 days, or I wanted to be cognizant of all those things. So it was a little bit frustrating, and I fought a little bit of an inner battle of my own, where I was before a little bit frustrated with folks that are like, you know what, we're not going to test. We're going to do the easy way, because if we feel fine but we don't know, then we don't know. But what even if I feel fine and I was infecting somebody else? I didn't want that on my conscience, But as fate would have it, I started to feel a little bit worse, to the point I'm like, I need to dig the test. And then, and I took 2 tests. Like the other day, I was second guessing myself. The first line of COVID, it was really, 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 really faint, but it was there. And the instructions tell you even if it's faint, you're still positive. I took the test again. I took it again. I'm like, and I shoved that thing further up my nose, and I'm like, and then within the first 2 minutes of the wait period, I'm like, there's the line. Like, I'm clearly positive. This isn't a mistake. I was hoping for a mistake. But even if it was a mistake and it was just something like strep throat or just a bug, that wouldn't have been good either. So, I'm grateful that I'm not great. I'm frustrated that after over 2 years, I finally got COVID. I'm grateful that it was this particular strand, and it could have been. I'm acknowledging this and grateful for it. It could have been far worse, from the hundreds of thousands of people who lost their lives throughout the course of this pandemic. And knock on wood, I'm not one of those, and I'm going to get better, and I'm going to continue to get better. I had one day of really intense uncomfort in terms of symptoms. Everything else has been manageable thus far. I'm going to count myself pretty fortunate for that. Hopefully you'll do the same. So until next time, remember to live life outside of the work that you do, and remember to take care of yourself.